There's one more light I'd like to talk about. I've created a point light for the remote control. So let's take a look here. Now this is just a standard Arnold point light, and there's a few steps that you need to take to get it to stick to your animated object here. So let's talk about some constraints. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and disable a couple of nodes that I've created here. And let's go over to the viewer. So where is our light? Our light is just hanging out here in space. Now, first of all, if you go to the common parameters, you can see here I've animated the intensity. I'll show you that in a little bit. But what you want to look here for is the radius. There's actually two radius parameters on a point light, and the one underneath the shader is the one that you need to set. So if you set this to 2, that just increases the size. It essentially makes it a sphere area light. I'll leave it at 0.5 for now. I'm pointing this out because if you go to the object tab up here, there's another radius. So this is not the correct radius. You need to use the one under material. So I've just basically placed the light somewhere close to the remote control. Now the first thing you want to do is make a point constraint. And all you need to do is middle click drag your remote light here into the base path. And then you need to find your remote control and then middle click drag that to the target path. The only other thing that you'll need to do is set, because I think the target origin is set to object. Now if you do that, your light is going to be way back at the origin or something. Not really sure where it went. But anyway, it kind of disappears when you do that. So you want to set this to face bounding box. Let's go and select our light again. So if we look at it, our light is now in the center of the remote control. We're going to need to make sure that it goes in the corner. So say you want to make a 3D transform node here. I'm going to make one of these. And I'm just turning this on for a second to show you something. So you see where the light is now. Basically, I'm going to transform it, but I'll show it to you working in a minute. But just as an example, let's see where this light is in relation to the remote. And then if I move to a different frame, you'll see that, let's maybe go, there's a good example. You can see here, the light is now closer to the remote. It's not in the right place, but it's actually moving around in space relative to the remote. We're going to get this working later. There's a step we need to take first, and that's to add an orient constraint. So let's turn this on here. This works exactly the same as the point constraint. So you got to set your base path to your light, and then you have to set your target path to your object. Then your target orientation is usually defaulted to object. So let's go ahead and set this to face. And now what we're going to do is enable our transform 3D node again here. And so now you can see it is in the corner. If I move to a different frame, you'll see that it's actually still in the corner. And so it's now sticking onto the corner of the remote control. So that's all you need to do. Now I keep creating a light filter by accident here because I'm hitting F to try and frame the light in the viewport. So if I hit F, it frames it here. But if I'm over here and I hit F, it makes a filter. So just be aware, you've got to be careful where you put your mouse. All right, we've got our light in the corner. One more node I want to mention is this constraint resolve. And I'm going to turn this on. This isn't really doing anything. For a while there when I was setting this up, I actually thought I needed this, but I left it here just in case because I want to mention it. When you're going to render something, it's going to resolve all the constraints down here. But if you're doing something else somewhere in your node graph that's dependent on where this thing is, for instance, then you're going to need to actually resolve the constraint before you do that. So that's why I had this before the transform 3D. And it's interesting that when I'm showing you this example, it's actually not doing anything, but it's there just in case, and just want to make you aware of it. There are cases where you need to resolve the constraints before you do something else underneath it in the node graph. Now, another type of constraint that you can do, if you make, say you made a spotlight here. Let's put it somewhere useful. Doesn't really matter right now. Okay, so there's our spotlight. It's close to our characters. So let's say we wanted to aim this spotlight at something. Well, you'll see under the object here that there's actually an enable aim constraint checkbox. And so lights actually will have an aim constraint built in. So you could grab a target like this, drop it in, and notice because this is set to object, it's pointing back at the origin, right? It's not going to move around. But if I change this to face bounding box, then now our spotlight is facing our character. And so if I move to a different frame, you'll see that now it's aimed at our character. So that's kind of nice that lights have that aim constraint built in. They don't have the other constraints though, and that's where you'll need something like the point constraint or the orientation constraint. Now, one more thing I need to mention about this light. So this point light, we're only going to use this in shot S1010. Okay, so that means that in each of the shots, we're going to need to turn it off because we don't need to render it out. So here in each of these shot specific gaffer nodes, you'll see that I've gone ahead and muted the light. And now that it's muted in all of the shots, let's go ahead and launch some quick preview renders of each of the shots just to make sure that this is all working. I'm going to go back down to a quarter res and 2x2 samples to keep it pretty fast. Okay, so let's go back down here and let's launch some multiple renders here. Full scene. Actually, we need to move to a frame that this is animated for. So let's go here. And because I animated the intensity, let's render it for at least the one shot where it's going to be turned on, maybe 137 or something like that. So you can see here I've got an animation curve. And so if you click on your little keyframe here, I've keyed this. And if you want to see those keys, you can click on our little icon here for the curves. And you'll see I've got some keyframes here on the timeline. So frame 137, it is turned on. 2 frames later, it's set to 0. So let's go ahead and render frame 137 and all 5 shots. Okay. You're going to get a preview of something here because if you notice here, now that it's gone through and launched these 5 renders and it went through and set the shot graph state variable for each of those shots, it landed on the final shot. You'll notice that our final shot here is missing something. The remote control is not in this shot at all. And so now our point light is showing an error. And if you go, let's go to our catalog. This shot's rendering. That one's rendering. This one hasn't started yet, but it's probably rendering. This one's rendering. But this one here is not. So we can check the log. Let's go to the render log. At somewhere in here, it's going to say that there's an error. So it just says there's an access violation, right? But the key is that because the remote control is not in this shot, these constraints don't work. So it can't resolve where it needs to put the point light for that scene. So there's actually 2 ways that you can fix this problem. The first would be to just go ahead and prune all of the lights instead of muting them. And so that's what I've actually done here. So if you go to any one of these prune nodes, you'll see that I'm actually just pruning the point light, and that completely removes it from the scene. So there is another solution that you can use, and that's actually to go back to these constraints. If you notice up here, there is a allow missing targets parameter in each one of these constraints. And so you can actually go ahead and flip this to yes. And so if you do that for each one of these, that should actually solve the problem. So you have your choice. You can either prune the lights completely, or you can just fix the individual constraints. So I've actually done both of these things. We should be able to go ahead and render this now and see if this is going to work. So you can see here, this was our errored out render, and we're on our shot S1042. Let's go ahead and do another preview render. There we go.